Hi everybody, welcome back to the Kotare 132 scale Spitfire Mk1 build. Last time, after one or two mishaps repainting the airframe, I managed to get all the painting done, and I also corrected the codes in a short episode that I put out last week. This time I'm going to go ahead and do the main weathering on the airframe, so that includes a panel line wash. I've already done some pre-shading effects on the airframe as well. So the wash adds to that, and I'm also going to do some chipping effects and some general staining on the airframe. And at that stage we'll get the whole model matte coated, ready for the final details. So I'll show you the processes I've been through to do the weathering on the airframe, and we'll make a start. I'm going to make a start this week with a panel line wash across the airframe. And for that I'm going to be using something new to me, which is this set of AK panel liners, and it contains 5 enamel washes basically. One for brown and green camouflage, obviously, so I'll use that on here. One for grey and blue, sand and desert camouflage, white and winter camouflage, and black. So it'll be interesting to see how these perform on the Spitfire. I'm going to start with the brown, so I'll do the top surfaces in the AK2071. So that's this one. Now, I'm told by one of my friends at my local model club who uses these that they need mixing really well. The pigment tends to settle at the bottom, as it does in most paints really, but particularly with these, and they need a really good shake and stir. This is a medium kind of brown grey colour, so let's just see what it looks like on the wing. So just a pin wash. I'll do some general weathering on the panels later on with some oils. This is just to mark out the panels at this stage. My usual panel wash is this Tamiya panel line accent colour, and my first impressions of this AK liner is that it's just a little bit thicker than the Tamiya. It certainly dries a bit quicker than the Tamiya as well. Next we'll take a look at the undersides. So I'm going to be using this one, which is white and winter camouflage, AK2074. Now this is quite unusual, it's a green colour. So I'm not sure how this is going to work, but we'll give it a go. The last colour I'm going to be using in this set is this black camouflage wash, which looks like a very pale grey. Okay, well that's interesting. I'm not completely sold on the white or the pale grey, but I'll see what it looks like once the excess has been removed. So the wash is dry now, and I want to remove it, or remove the excess anyway. So this is a dry cotton bud, I've not got anything on it. If the wash is very stubborn, you can use some mineral spirits or white spirit to get the excess off, but this is coming off fairly easily. But because it's dry, it's staying in the panel lines. Sometimes if you don't leave the wash on for long enough, you just end up drying the wash out of the panel lines, so it kind of defeats the object really. But this is just right. And having the wash on the Q-tip here or cotton bud just stains the paint surface a little bit as well, which is what we're after. So this is building up the weathering effects, starting with the mottle effect. Now we've got the staining from the wash, the panel wash. And I'll use some oil paints as well, just to add to the effect in certain places. But as ever with weathering, it's a case of knowing when to stop. I don't like my models over weathered. It's the first time I've used it, and it's quite different to the Tamiya wash that I've used in the past, which is this panel line accent colour. It's a little bit more, I think it's probably a little bit more versatile, this AK wash, and it reminds me a little bit of Flory washes, which is a clay based wash. So that gives you the ability to move it round a little bit on the panels and start to create some shadow effects on the model as well. So that's really nice. I really like this wash. The wash is becoming a bit more stubborn now as it's drying, so I've just very lightly dampened the cotton bud here with some white spirit, and that just loosens the wash a little bit. You don't want to soak the cotton bud because that will just remove all the wash, which is not what you want. So that just kind of reactivates the wash, if you like. So you really need to concentrate at this point and make sure that you get to all the areas where you've applied the wash. Because once you apply the matte varnish over the top of it, you're not going to be able to clean it up anymore. And what you don't want to happen is to have a pool of untreated wash somewhere on the model, overcoated with the matte varnish, and you're stuck with it. So I really like the AK wash, particularly this shade for the brown and green camouflage. It really works out well, and it enables you to do that staining work as I described. Really adds just the right amount of shading to the camouflage scheme, and that's something that I'll be using in the future. On the undersides, I've gone ahead and removed the grey wash. The AK2074 that I used on the white, I'm okay with that. It adds a nice amount of staining to the underside. I don't like the black camouflage, the pale grey for the black camouflage. It looks very artificial, so what I've done is I've gone back over the underside with some Tamiya pure black accent colour. Now bear in mind that the black that I used on the underside to paint the underside was actually a rubber black, so it's not pure. And the pure black panel line wash is enough just to accentuate the panels on the black side. And it is true what people say, that it's very difficult to achieve an interesting effect with black schemes. Okay, that's the wash stage done. I now want to move on and add some streaking effects, particularly to the underside. I'll do a little bit on the top side, but I want to just dirty this underside up a little bit more. Okay, so this is the next shade I'm going to use. Again, it's AK. This is streaking grime. So we'll try and get some effects onto the undersurfaces with this. The staining underneath Spitfires was pretty distinctive, and often it was quite heavy. But you need to be careful with this step, because it's very easy to overdo it and make the underside just completely filthy. And the other thing is that you've got to have some idea about where the staining is coming from. So for example, you see a lot of weathering done with stains coming from these two holes here. I think people just assume that there's some sort of fuel drain or an oil drain or something like that. But actually they're jacking pads. So they're not going to have any oil or fluids coming out of them. Whereas any engine leaks would come from this area of the cowling to the back of the cowling here. And it would move backwards around the supercharger intake. So it's just worth knowing where the leaks that you're trying to represent are coming from, rather than just assuming that every panel that you see on an aeroplane or every hole on the underside would have fluid leaking from it, because more often than not they didn't. Okay, so that's as much as I'm going to do for the washes. And that needs to be sealed now with a coat of flat varnish. Then once that's dry, we can add a little bit more weathering to the model with some oil paint. Okay, so the model's had an overall coat of Tamiya XF86 flat clear, and I've thinned this something like 70% thinners, so it's a very thin application, and I've put 3 coats on here. It is possible to run into trouble with matte varnish. Sometimes it can create a bit of a white bloom on the paintwork, which obviously you don't want. And that's usually, in my experience, because the paint isn't thinned or the varnish isn't thinned enough. So it's going on too thick, and also that the actual pigment, if that's what you want to call it, in the varnish isn't mixed properly. So the 2 little tips I'd give for applying matte varnish is to make sure that it's mixed properly, and make sure that it's thinned properly and applied in very light coats. So as you can see, I've unmasked the cockpit and started to unmask the transparencies on this. I'll just get the rest off the windscreen. This is some of the interior green that I mixed up. I'll use this just to touch up a little bit around the transparencies. Okay, so next step is to apply the exhaust staining, which is my most nerve-wracking part of a model. It's easy to ruin it at this point. And I'm going to be using some Tamiya XF66 light grey, and this is virtually all thinners. There's just a couple of drops of paint in the cup there. The rest is all thinners. I've turned the compressor down to about 10 psi. I don't want any pooling of this. It's got to be a very subtle effect. I've already started the weathering process with the underpainting, where I put some of the rubber black down behind the exhaust just to stain it a little bit already. And now I'll just go in with the grey. And I'm kind of angling the airbrush backwards, and I want the exhaust to go down towards the wing a little bit. So there's barely any paint coming out of the airbrush at all. And you have to just occasionally step back just to check what you're doing. So this is rubber black, and I'm just going to apply this in a very thin line just inside the grey that I've just made. So with all the painting completed on the airframe, I want to just add some Tamiya modelling wax overall, and that does a few things really. The first thing is that it protects the paint from any finger marks, although as you can see I try to handle the model as much as possible with plastic gloves on at this stage, because fingerprints show very easily on this matte surface. So the wax protects from that, and it also gives you the chance to remove any last bits of dust or dirt on the surface, and I apply it with this sponge. Tamiya actually supply an applicator with this wax, but I've lost mine a long time ago. In fact, I need a new bottle of this. And you don't need a lot, just a little drop like that, and just apply it in a circular motion all the way around the airframe. I was a bit wary about this product to start with, especially on a matte surface. I thought it would gloss it, but it doesn't. It just gives it a really nice natural sheen. This wax is also great on canopies. Really just adds that extra layer of gloss to them. The problem in the UK is that it's not generally available. You have to get this from Europe. So the last job for this part of the process is to just add a few chips and scratches here and there. So I'm going to be using some of these AK pencils. So this is the aluminium. Again, this is an effect that it's easy to overdo. So I'm going to leave it there. It's very easy at this stage to go too far with the chipping. Before you know it, you've got silver lines all over the airframe. So that's quite enough for me. And what I like to do is just view the model from a bit further back every now and again, just to make sure you're not going too far, and see what the effect is just from that little bit of distance. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there for this week. That's all the painting, all the weathering done, except for just a little bit of fuel staining, which I'm going to do. But I'll do that at the same time as the undercarriage, because they need very similar sorts of treatment. So the model's coming on well, pretty happy with it, and hopefully we'll get it finished next week. Okay, so there we are, all done, and next time in the final part of the series I'll do all the rest of the detail parts. We get the prop, the undercarriage done, finish off the canopy bits and pieces, and one or two other details. So it's been a fairly quick build by my standards anyway, because of the engineering on the Kotare kit, and hopefully we'll be able to finish it off next time without any problems. So that'll be coming up next week at the usual time, 8 o'clock Friday night, so hopefully you'll join me for the final reveal of this lovely Spitfire kit, and I'll see you then. Bye for now, everybody.